with physical abuse, you do get an adrenaline dump, and you're able to toughen up against it, and you're able to withstand it more and more. And what hurt you yesterday might not hurt you a week from now. But with the mental, it's breaking you down in your core. Your resolve to exist is just being beaten down, and your spirit is killed. And when you kill a spirit, when you kill your spirit, there's nothing left of you.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
How did it feel when you put that pen to paper and got this stuff out?
It felt really, really good. And you know what, Kevin and Mike? I don't care no more. I don't care if you guys judge me, because you know what? I judge myself long enough. And you know, the way life is this. I haven't done a drug in like 31 years. I'm clean off of alcohol 24 plus years. I have maintained a normal life for many, many decades now.
Quote unquote normal life.
Yes, quote unquote. I mean, as far as my neighbors would think. I mean, my Nebraska friends that are reading this book cannot believe the guy that was in charge of making sure all the pharmaceuticals were accounted for in the penitentiary hospital was my job.
Mike, I don't know about you, but I'm listening to Charlie talk about this stuff. I couldn't be more proud, because you remember when Charlie first came into the basement where the old studio was?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And what Charlie looked like. Charlie, you were nervous. I know you prepared.
Yeah.
All right. I know you over-prepared.
Charlie's over. I was going to say he over-prepares for everything because that's the type of personality he has.
And I'm watching this progression from our show that we did it's got to be almost a year ago. It's pretty close to probably 9-10 months ago. This progression of this really, I don't want to say downtrodden, but you had like a sadness to you. Mm-hmm. And then I see you now when you're talking on camera.
Yeah.
And I see the look in your eye, and I see the glimmer in your eye.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's like raising your child. We raised Charlie right before our eyes.
Yeah.
It is so. Our show, that's what we want out of our show, because this whole book is
our show in a nutshell.
The
too.
roadmap of the Suffering Podcast. It's you start at one place, you go down, and you come back up, and there's many different levels in between.
I think the general public doesn't realize addiction and how it affects society and how it affects their loved ones. I don't think people realize that. And I don't think that the general public understands addiction. That if you're a drug addict and we stop doing drugs and we don't do any treatment for that, because remember, the drugs are only a symptom of the addiction. There's a deeper underlying problem. It will shift to alcohol, and all of a sudden you'll be a drinker. And then all of a sudden you'll close up on drinking, and all of a sudden you want to have gummy bears with THC or whatever in it. An addict has to arrest the addiction.
I always consider addiction like an umbrella, and underneath that umbrella falls all these different levels. If you're always going to have that umbrella hanging over your head.
Yes.
It's what you fill underneath it with. It's what you're trying to mask. Some people do it with drugs. Some people do it with pornography, like Mike. Mm-hmm. So. Come on.
Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to fill that void.
But there are some good addictions. There are some positive addictions.
This book was almost like an addiction to you then. Getting this book, finishing this book and writing it, like you said, you went full bore into it.
It went full bore. And can you imagine? I can't imagine. You know, I have an unbelievable memory. And I also, throughout my life, have taken notes. I got boxes of stuff. I recorded my life when I worked at the Department of Corrections. If there was things that went on during the course, I have all those records. And in creating this book for the reader, I made sure that it was as accurate as possible by doing newspapers.com to get the actual articles, by doing deep Google searches to make sure when the reader read this, because there's a lot of information here that they're going to be like, wow. I mean,
your recall is amazing. And this is a 50-year book.
Yeah, it's actually longer. The book really takes place in 1968 when I get my German Shepherd. We go to Woodstock in 1969, and then we start the 70s.
And you picked up that hitchhiker.
We picked up the hitchhiker.
Who smelled really bad. Now, Mike and I have arrested people who smelled less than pleasant. So when you described that as a little kid with your dog sitting in the middle.
Yes.
And this is what I'm talking about earlier, where you have a way of writing where you can have the reader visualize what you're going through.
You almost feel like you're there.
I could smell this hippie.
Yeah.
You know, Kevin, mental, and I saw this when I worked corrections, mental recall is probably the worst, okay? And the reading I've done, like The Art of Thinking Clearly, really says that. So in my life, there's been some major events that I remember like there's no tomorrow, and some of the trauma has caused me to block out periods of time. And my trauma was a double trauma. I had a physical father who was just beat me like a man when I was little, and I had a mother who played the mental games. And I don't think anything that I went through is unique, but the level of craziness might have a cornerstone.
So you've experienced both types of abuse as a child. So we're going to start when you're young. You experience both physical and mental / emotional
Yes.
abuse. I've long said for myself, I'd rather be physically abused than mentally or emotionally abused because I find that more painful.
Yes.
As somebody who's gone through both, what is your take on that?
My take on it is that with physical abuse, you do get an adrenaline dump, and you do get you're able to toughen up against it, and you're able to withstand it more and more. And what hurt you yesterday might not hurt you a week from now. But with the mental, it's breaking you down in your core. Your resolve to exist is just being beaten down, and your spirit is killed. And when you kill a spirit, when you kill your spirit, there's nothing left of you. But when it comes to physical abuse, you know what? There's a part of you that says, you know what? Give the best you can. I'll handle this.
Well,
You know, physical abuse, you have the scars and the wounds.
Right.
You know, mental abuse, you're hiding all that.
Yeah.
And it should fall under like mental health issues.
absolutely.
Because, you know, you're getting all this, you know, verbal abuse and all that, and you have no signs of showing, you know, there's no way of showing that.
There's no way of showing that. So both of those things were going on, and I wouldn't want to live it again.
And you were going through it all alone.
I was.
It would have been much easier, not better, but much easier if you had somebody who was going through it. Like, say, and I don't wish this on anybody, if your mother was going through physical abuse alongside of you, because then you could have found something to bond with.
Right, right. Well, I got through it, and this is a book that almost didn't happen. This is a story that almost didn't happen. And the fact that I crossed paths with you guys, see, now the book was started to be written in 18, and it was pretty much done by 19, but I didn't release it. See, this book was really a gift to me. And then when I started to do the podcast and started talking, and we'll get to the reason why. I mean, I would have lived my life in obscurity. Nobody would have ever known my name if it wasn't for a couple of things we're going to talk about.
How many times did you go to release this book and pull it back?
I did a number of times, or I would just have another editor go through it and re-edit or look, and I played games. I just did not want to release it.
I was going to say, you were having those other editors just so that you had more time and you could say no.
Here's what happens, and here's the growth I have now. You know, when you've been abused, you seem to have an allegiance with your abusers, okay? And you can't believe this is going on, but you kind of you feel bad for them, and you're like, you know what? If I put this book out, it'll expose a lot of people. But, you know, I started to look over my life, and I said, my brother moved out when he was 16, and he changed his last name legally, and he never looked back, and he moved 8 states away. And at some point, I had to be true to myself and say, you know what? This is about me. Whatever time I got left on this planet, I'm going to at least have a homecoming for me.
Wow, because you lost a childhood.
I lost a child, but I got one back, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
You know what, though? People who've gone through abuse, and maybe this was part of it too, they call it resisting success because you were never used to having success. You were never used, like you said, you lived in anonymity. Mm-hmm. You know, and maybe you not wanting to release the book was you were resisting success. You didn't want to, you know, you're still reverting back to your childhood trauma.
Very well could be. Very well could be.
Where'd you get that resistance of success? You didn't just make that up.
What was the social media question?
It's where do you get your thought-provoking comments from?
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Where'd you get that? The bathroom wall?
Yeah, right under my name and phone number.
Charlie, there's you go deep into the addiction portion in this book, and it gets bad. It gets really bad. But there's one point in particular that I want to bring out because, like I told you earlier, this book made me tear up. At one particular point, you were just in the throes of addiction, and you were downtrodden, you were homeless, and you're on this train, and a stranger sees you and sees that you're not doing well.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that story?
I was on a Jamaica train platform waiting for a train. And this peaceful-looking fellow looked at me, and I looked at him, and he came over to me. And in moments, which seemed like forever, but it was only a couple minutes, he gave me the rundown of his life. He had told me that he had been addicted to drugs and that he had lived in the Bronx in a refrigerator box. And I asked him, why is he telling me this? He says, you don't look well.
But you weren't like the stereotypical homeless person. You because I've seen pictures of you from back then.
Right.
You know, you're a big dude.
Yeah.
You were in shape.
And pretty much well kept for that.
Right.
I was, but the thing is, Kevin, that's part of addiction. You know, I was running around. I mean, for the listeners, remember Joe Klecko?
Sure.
I had a
Yeah.
neck. I had a 20-inch neck, and I had, the arms and chest that went along with it because I had lifted a lot of weights. Because prior to hitting the drugs, I was working in the nightclubs, and I spent a lot of time with the rage I had lifting weights and doing all that. But it still didn't matter. My eyes told the story to this guy, Michael, and he would tell me where there would be help. There would be a monastery along the Hudson called Graymore.
Is that still in existence?
It's still in existence.
Yeah.
And it was the beginning for me to realize I was done and I would be seeking a spiritual intervention to stop this craziness.
And you had been to detoxes before, rehabs. You had been there.
Too many to count.
No kidding. And what was so different about this Graymore?
Well, the thing was, they came at me with the routine 12 steps, 12 traditions, which works for people. But I was so damaged, so much trauma, that a rehab didn't have enough time to put in all the help I needed. Remember, rehab's got a lot of people. And I would send them on a seesaw back and forth because I was not ready to face myself. But the monastery would help me do this by not having to look at myself by myself. To be able to tell me, look, there's a higher power. You got a belief in God. You're not doing this alone. And the monastery is what I needed in order to separate me from the drugs and have the clarity to say, what am I doing with my life? And once I got clean off the drugs, it became apparent to me there was something that different that changed.
Stepping back just a hair, there was the point when you had called your father, who you had a contentious relationship with.
Yes.
You call your father to take you up to this monastery.
Yes.
And you're hungry and you're homeless.
I am.
And all you want is some chicken.
That's all I want. I want a meal.
This is one of the most amazing parts of this book to me. To me, it's really one of the climaxes of this book.
Yeah.
Is you go up to this stand to get some chicken and you don't have any money. You order it, but you don't have any money.
I just got 55 cents about. Yeah.
And the guy grabs you.
Yes.
And starts assaulting you.
He does. And just to back up for a second, Kevin, basically what happened was I thought by ordering the chicken.
See, if you would have got the chicken from the Grand Saloon.
Then I would have been different.
At 940 Van Houten Avenue, Grand Saloon. Grand Saloon's got some good chicken.
And I wouldn't have been fighting like I was here. But I wound up ordering the chicken. And then I put the 55 cents on the counter and told him I didn't have the money. And the guy got incensed. And is incensed. And I didn't react, do nothing. And he put his hands on me.
After the fight's over and you were found not culpable of starting the fight.
Right.
This is the incident where a man in blue,
yes,
a sergeant, comes up to you, sees that you're hurting.
He does.
And what's he do?
He says, what's your story? And I told him my story in just a few moments. I told him my father was coming to pick me up. I was going to go up to a monastery and I was going to get clean from drugs. And I could tell he knew that I was hurting. And he told me to go outside. And moments later, he came out with the chicken dinner and he paid for it for me. And it was just that act of kindness. you would have thought I hit the lottery. I would have a smile as big as can be. But it was the turning point in my life where I saw that I stopped fighting. I stopped fighting.
Just that little random act of kindness.
Yeah. It was huge.
Made a huge difference. And I'm reading this, and tears are coming down. This is amazing.
Yeah.
You know who that gentleman was?
The sergeant?
Yes.
I do not know him personally.
You don't know him
No.
personally. I would love to find that
Oh,
guy
my
just
goodness.
to shake his hand to say, you made a difference. Because as police officers, that's all we want to do.
That's all you want.
But now you had a chance to pay that forward too.
I have had a chance to pay it forward, and
When you took the trip to New York City to go meet the lawyer,
yes.
and you ran into the homeless guy
the
there.
the journalist from New York that was out there with the death row inmate.
Yep,
Yes.
yep.
Yes.
But you throughout your whole life, and this monastery takes you in.
It
right?
takes me in.
And you were resistant to it in the beginning, but I watched up until this point your family and you taking in dogs and really having a bond with these different animals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the monastery did for you. Because I know you're doing that now. We'll get into that in just a little
Yeah.
bit. But that's what the monastery, that's how I saw it. The monastery brought you in and showed you the humanity and the friendship and the love that these animals had for you growing up and in your throes of addiction.
They did, and you know, it was the first time it was my first time in my life that I really felt the word love effectively. And here's how it was. I remember after about 2 weeks in the monastery, eating regular meals, I felt my old self again. I just thought this is addiction. I thought I had a bad string of luck. So I told the monastery that I was ready to go back home. And
I'm
they
cured.
listened. And they said to me, you have no home. You're homeless. We're providing a home for you because we care for you. And I started to cry. I realized at that point I was done. I was really done. And you know, here's the good news. I never had to pick up drugs again. I never had to go down it again. And but there's more healing that goes on after drugs. Drugs were just a part of the problem.
But is that the first time you ever felt actual love?
That was the first time that I ever felt like I was cared for, like my life had some value.
You move on out of the monastery, and I know there's several different steps, which you get into very clearly in this book.
Yeah.
Between there and time to, I know you followed a girl. They sometimes lead you in a direction.
Sure.
You follow this woman out to Nebraska, but even that you were resistant to.
I was resistant to that.
You didn't want to leave your home to go to some. What
You
was
know
that
what? I'm
about?
going to say this to you guys. I really do like New York. You know what? New York people are just knock around people. And when you're from New York, there's like some type of, even if you're well, you're still a little nuts because like New Yorkers think they're all famous, so they think something's big from being from New York. And I was very proud to be from New York. And I just didn't want to leave it, but I did leave it.
Is it maybe you're afraid of change?
It could be that, but it's also like, you know, I wanted to have my day in the sun where I'm from and moving to Nebraska. Although, you know, a lot of people don't know much about the Midwest. Nebraska's not the South. It's not the West Coast. It's just really like neutral. It's a neutral place to live, and it's pretty it was actually a lot more modern than Long Island was because it's a new place compared to New York.
The infrastructure is probably
The infrastructure is
much
way better.
But you weren't done with suffering.
No, I
You
had more
weren't-
suffering to do.
You had a little bit more, but they
Yeah.
were tests.
Yeah.
You're clean, and you move out to the Midwest, and everything seems great. You're married.
Yeah.
And you seem to have this life it's coming together.
It
All
is.
that stuff that you wished for, but you're not done yet.
No, I'm not done yet.
Now you start having problems at home,
Yes,
and it leads you back one little trip up into addiction.
it does. And this is the crazy part. I just felt that is that, you know, here is a guy that went through all this trauma, and now I'm working at the Department of Corrections. And instead of like working at work release or working for, you know, the youth facility, I'm working at the penitentiary. But then I'm not even just working at the regular general population. I'm stuck with death row, segregation units, the crazy shit, okay? So at some point, I decide that I'm safe from everything and I'm going to have a drink.
Because I got this beat.
Yeah, I felt as though, you know, I got a job, and I don't really like alcohol that much, so how can this thing go bad? Well, the thing I realized quickly is your brain does not know what it's being anesthetized by. So it doesn't think, okay, this is a different substance, it'll react different. No, it was like I never stopped. The craziness came back. So the drinking was short-lived, but it really had brought me to my knees and made me convinced. On April 5th of 1998, I came home from the penitentiary after working a 2 to 10 shift, stopped at the liquor store, and just guzzled down 40 ounces of beer. And that would be the last drink. And I'm in permanent sobriety one day at a time from that period forward. I just celebrated 24 plus years.
Do you live the rest of your life that one day at a time? Because I do something very similar to that, where you tell yourself, if you were to tell yourself, I'm never having a drink ever again, I'm never doing a drug ever again, that's pretty overwhelming to think about.
It is, but
You
you
may
know,
be fooling
you know what,
yourself.
you know what? You are exactly right, Kevin. But here's what the nice thing about it is: a drink or a drug is never farther than my arm can reach. But here's the good part: I like being crystal clear so much more than I like being inebriated. Okay, I'm hooked on consciousness now. I want to deep breathe. I want to go swimming when it's cold out. I want to do everything I can to get the most out of this life because I lost so much time.
Where you concentrate more on your body. Your body has become your new addiction.
It has become my new addiction, and being conscious. I mean, you could, look, there's no secret. I mean, I eat once a day. I don't want anything in my way because even with food, I found if I take in a bunch of food, I'm like punch drunk. I get that insulin high and then I'm low, and man, I'm just not doing that. I just eat once a day and I'm done.
That's why we're big proponents of one of our sponsors, Xbody. If you go to Xbody US and go to their facility in Wayne, they're all about making this whole so this can be whole.
It's exactly right.
Right? Through testosterone therapy, through IV drips, they do cosmetic stuff there. This is the world we live in.
Gut checks.
Gut checks.
Kevin, an unhealthy body cannot house a healthy mind. And I know a lot of people don't think that. Really, when you're crystallizing your life is 3 parts, okay? There's the spiritual, mental, and physical part, which every 12-step program and any spiritual program has in any religion. But you don't get it back spiritual first. You get back your physical condition. That's the first thing. You work on your body. Then your mind clears up. Once your mind clears up, you have the ability to pray and meditate.
Body, mind, and soul.
There you go. And you can't do any praying and meditating if you got unhealthy gut bacteria.
You go through, you get yourself sober.